Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you. Featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. You know, it's a very interesting thing. I interviewed my next two guests before, and one of them is called Presley Acuna, and the other one is KENDALL SMITH, and they had a lot to say about Trump. Now, I've invited them back again because this is really the time that televisions are making sensational statements. They're doing shows about Trump over and over and over again, but there must be a reason that they feel that he deserves that kind of attention. So I want to talk to Presley Acuna and KENDALL SMITH all about their book, which is called Trumpicana, and I want to find out what they think about the sensationalism that's going on. So let's start with Presley Acuna. Now, Presley, what do you attribute to the fact that the stations all over, radio and TV and even all the rags, and I'm talking about newspapers and magazines, they're all doing discussions and various kinds of things about Trump? What is it about his personality that they're doing this?
Hi, Susan. First of all, thanks for having us back on your show. It's really a pleasure to be back.
Pleasure's mine.
And to answer your question, it's really, our theory is that it's really a symptom of the fact that the news industry has become an entertainment industry, not so much the news itself. I blame it all on Ted Turner. It all started with the CNN 24/7 news cycle. That was a major innovation. And now you had news 24/7, which was essentially a vehicle for advertising. And you needed to have news that would keep people watching. So news became more about entertaining you, the eyeballs, than actually dissemination of news or curated news or editorials. And that has led to more and more ridiculous behavior being enabled under the guise of fair and balanced reporting. Mm-hmm. So no matter how extreme a position might be, it gets equal time and becomes legitimized, right? And right. Donald Trump's presidential nomination and then competition in the general election with Hillary Clinton is a perfect example of enabling what was once unacceptable or ridiculous or extreme behavior and presenting it as if it's normal behavior, and it's so outlandish that people are just glued to the TV. They're just addicted to it. We want it every day, yeah. I would even say.
Now, Kendall, let me ask you the same question. What do you feel is the reason that TV and all the other communications tools, they all make him sound he sounds like a fool very often, but they give him all that attention. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, thank you again as well on my end for having us on. And, it's funny how a day doesn't go by when Trump doesn't put his foot in his mouth. And I think it's part of his strategy just to stay in front of the cameras. When you think about how he's positioning himself in his campaign, it's really geared to staying in the spotlight, staying as part of the conversation with the talking heads, and the experts come in and they give their contrasting views about how it's bad for the country, how he's inaccurate, how he's lying, but in the same time you have a token Trump spokesperson saying he didn't really mean what he said. But the net is, it really is, I think Trump perceives news as, to use Presley's analogy, as entertainment, and he's gearing it that way. As someone that has a little more capability for critical analysis, that we are writers, we do that. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people need to ask themselves, and what we do in the book is we look at what is a Trump presidency going to look like? Yeah. And that, in my opinion, it makes Donald Trump the largest piñata on the political stage we've had in 200 years. Yeah. And that's looking at someone that, what is his thought process, his decisioning process? What is it going to look like? And we have a lot of entertainment with that as well. And Trumpicana is one of the only publications out there that looks kind of beyond where we are in the immediate present. And I think that was entertaining for us, and we think will be entertaining for readers, and hopefully Americans will sober up before the November election.
Presley, both of you really have the same idea about Trump. It sounds like you realize that he, in all fairness to Trump, that he doesn't sound like quite the person that he should be if he was running for president. Now, let's talk a little bit more about Trumpicana. What are you trying to accomplish by writing this book?
The idea behind writing a collection of satirical stories was to, number one, it is all about entertainment, so we do want to entertain our readers, and it is a juicy topic. But also to illuminate the outlandishness of what is going on and make people think about the consequences if it is allowed to continue. So in a theoretical Trump presidency, what might happen, and in the aftermath of a Trump presidency, what might happen to our political process, to our standards of acceptable behavior. Those stories that we wrote dwell on those topics, but do it in a very tongue-in-cheek fashion, because the idea is to, make you laugh, but also to make you think.
Kendall, do you have the book in front of you?
We do, yes.
Okay, so what I would like you to do, because people love to laugh, there's no question about it, so I'd like you to take a little section and just read it to us. I want people to know what you've written and why it's so satirical.
Yeah, sure. And there's one passage that kind of sums up in my story that I think you might find entertaining and your readers will find entertaining. The title of my short story is White House Arrest. Presley's is Performance Anxiety. But in my story, a vindictive Secret Service director who's in charge of the entire Secret Service has a vendetta against who I refer to as President Trump. And I think you can figure out who I'm talking about. But she basically has him cornered in the White House. It's a situation where she's orchestrated a house arrest for Trump to isolate him from the world and from Congress and from the Supreme Court so that he is completely removed from power. But he's still in the White House, and he's not allowed to leave. So the idea is that she has this confrontation, and she sets this up so that she is not held liable. She's quote-unquote following orders. Mm-hmm. So she explains, and she has the confrontation. I'll read it to you now with Trump. It's her and Trump in the Oval Office, and he asks her, "So you orchestrated this?" And she responds, "I only follow orders, sir." He shook his head in disbelief. "Then it's a coup d'etat. For God's sake, why? Why are you doing this to me?" She took a long breath, folded her arms, and then leaned against the wall. "Where shall I begin? First off, you're a racist of the highest caliber, barring Muslims from the country and whatnot." Trump responds, "Like I haven't heard that before."
Right.
"You're bad on the international front simply because our neighbors will hate you, plus you have zero diplomatic experience. You want to start a commerce war with our number one trading partner and encourage militarization across most of the world. Our allies have no idea if you'll turn your back on them, and on the home front, you flip-flopped about the policies you would and would not support." She watched Trump's back stiffen. "Women have no idea if you're going to ban abortions. 30 million people who have access to health care for the first time are going to be cut off." She watched his face contort with contempt. "Your economic advisors want to gut the Fed and pack that institution with a bunch of laissez-faire cronies who will take orders from you, and God knows who you'll finally nominate to the Supreme Court." She stood erect, stared down the man without even so much as a blink.
Wow.
He started breathing heavily. But I can stop there, but that's kind of her rant on summarizing what Trump kind of illustrates in the media. Mm-hmm. And so mine's a little more humorous and a little more tongue-in-cheek, but it puts Trump hopefully in the right place.
So now, Presley, he read his little section to us, and I would like you to just take another little section that you wrote and give our audience an idea of what is in Trumpicana.
Sure, Susan. So my story, as mentioned by Kendall, is entitled Performance Anxiety, and it happens in the future, about 16 years after a theoretical Trump presidency has come and gone, right? Mm-hmm. And what's happened in the intervening time is that the election process has really devolved and really melted down so that it is exactly like a reality TV show. And in fact, it's called the Presidential Smackdown of 2032.
Oh, gosh.
So, yes, it's pretty ridiculous. So anyway, the main character is a senator by the name of Randall Bradley, and he's kind of the last conventional candidate. Everyone else is really off, over the top and over the edge. So he's about to go on stage, and he's thinking back about some of his opponents that he's defeated. So I'll read you that part.
Sure.
So this is him speaking. It's kind of a monologue. California had been formidable. I was sure I was a goner against the Gippers. No one had foreseen the possibility of a candidate presenting him or herself as a team, in this case, a team of clones of Ronald Reagan, who proposed a presidency by committee. It was seductive. The nation had considered it, but ultimately, the bickering among the Ronnies led to their downfall, especially when one of them decided to shoot all the others right on the debate stage last month. National open carry has its risks. And I almost gave up the ghost in Massachusetts. The Kennedy bot was an incredible simulacrum of the original Jack, an IE in a suit, looking nearly human, but just an inch short of being totally convincing. We had yet to fully jump the so-called uncanny valley of revulsion when something looks human but is not quite there. And yet it sounded just as bold and appealing as our original Cold War president. With its encyclopedic access to the world's data banks, it could outfact any opponent in a debate. People were creeped out, but also excited. It was something different. I finally resorted to throwing my glass of water at it, ultimately shorting it out. It had died in mid-sentence, blathering in moistened electronic confusion. Ask not what this gantry can do for you, but what Yukons can do for IRK. The audience loved it.
Well, it sounds really fun. Now, okay, so I want the two of you to let our audience know. Right now, people are very confused. They don't know whether they should vote for Trump because, he's a little bit more conservative, if you want to call it that. And they also have a kind of poor view of Mrs. Clinton. So everybody's stuck. And they say, well, who is the worst of the two evils? So if you were, of course, I know already what you're going to answer, but if you're going to vote, I don't want to know exactly who you're going to vote for, but I could take a guess. And do you think that if Trump gets in, we're going to have a mess? And because of that, would you vote for Hillary?
Well, I'm going to do a write-in, and I'm writing in Presley Acuna for president. Because we're all going to be better off with bots instead of Trump.
I'll write you in too, Kendall.
Oh, my VP. Can I be the VP?
There you go.
At the end of the day is who's going to be more presidential, who's going to be more respected on the world stage, and who do you want in control of 3,000 nuclear warheads? How is Trump going to handle a North Korea 6th nuclear explosion if that happens during the next 4 years versus Clinton? How is education going to be managed or healthcare going to be managed that affects every family in this country? Who's going to do a better job? I don't want to endorse anyone because we're authors, and we can come out with a book in 6 months about the goofs of Hillary Clinton. Who knows? But at the same time, it's like I think you have to be considerate about the people you elect in office because they represent the United States on the global stage. And by that measure, I think people can choose their own favorites.
Yeah. And Presley, do you feel the same way as Kendall?
I really think it comes down to for any voter, whether you think that the skills required to do the job well, aside from personalities, are business skills. Because what I mean by that is Donald Trump is selling the idea that he's a businessman and that a businessman's approach is what is needed to run this country, versus a state person's or a politician is not really the right word. That has negative connotations. What I mean is an experienced statesman or stateswoman, like, the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody who has government experience, international experience, and knows the workings of the world, economics, political forces, how to work Congress, how to work with lawmakers. Those details are the reality of running a government. Mm-hmm. So who knows about that? Is it the so-called businessman who ran casinos in Atlantic City, or is it the former Secretary of State? For me, it's pretty obvious the right choice.
Yeah. Okay, so again, the two of you, what I am interested in knowing, did you do research on former presidents? And if you did, was there anything like what's happening now with Trump? Was there some sort of fool that was running for president, and how did they deal with it during that particular time?
Well, I'm going to try first, okay?
Right.
So
I'm trying next.
Ronald Reagan sold himself as a businessman and was also an entertainer prior to taking the role of president. So I saw many parallels there. And, in fact, I think that a lot of the policies that were put into place, the whole idea of supply-side economics, for example, mm-hmm. were really poor ideas, really false ideas, but sold under the premise that we're going to run this like a business and all boats will rise and all that kind of thing. Although he is by no means in the same category as Donald Trump, right? Mm-hmm. Ronald Reagan, ran 2 terms, and a lot of people like him. I think of Ross Perot a little bit, mm-hmm. who was an independent candidate and was being taken seriously. Again, a person who was self-made and was selling those personality traits as the winning traits. That's what we need at that time. That's what we would need at that time. And then, got a little too much airtime and started talking goofy things and disqualified himself. Mm-hmm. And those are 2 that come to mind. What about you, Kendall?
I'd say the only thing that comes close historically may be the election of Andrew Jackson, because it was the establishment, the Whigs party, that represented the Republicans back in the day, in that era. And Andrew Jackson was known as a Republican Democrat, mm-hmm. which was more liberal. And the Whigs basically accused him of not being able to read, not being able to write, really slanderous, very vehemently opposed editorials. That one of the nastiest elections when he ran in 1828. Mm-hmm. And that's the only thing I could really directly connect, because of just the nastiness of this election, the tenor, the tone, things you would never hear a candidate say that are coming out about NRA members supporting Donald Trump through means of eliminating candidate Clinton by some way or another in an indirect way.
The insinuation.
The insinuation, yeah, exactly.
Right.
So that's the only thing historically, but we are definitely in a historic moment. We're never going back from this. Like, it's going to be a whole different ballgame
mm-hmm.
as we go forward.
Oh, absolutely. Now, all over the world, there are different kinds of ways in which they elect a president or a premier or somebody of that nature. Can you tell our audience what the difference between the way it's done, for example, in Britain as opposed to how it's done here in America?
Well, Britain has a parliamentary system with many parties, not just 2 parties, and they need to form, it is necessary for them to form coalitions in order to have a governing body, right? They have to have coalitions before they can govern, because no particular faction is large enough to outright grab a majority, which it just creates the groundwork, the basis for compromise and debate and, a civilized government. Although there's other parliamentary governments in the world where they have fistfights on the floor. It's not a given, but that's the ideal, right? Whereas in the United States of America, we have basically a polar system, right? You're either on the left or on the right, and anything that's in between is very small and insignificant. Even though many Americans, almost a third, I think, and growing, consider themselves to be independents, and yet the independent candidate is never a formidable candidate. That's interesting, right? Right. So it's really a left-right bipolar country. And the other thing, I'm not sure about Britain, but the whole idea of the electoral college versus a straight majority is also unique to America, I think, where you can have a majority vote in your favor, but still lose an election because the electoral votes go the other way. So, that leads right into a discussion of gerrymandering and how that has corrupted our system of representation.
Well, first, what I want you to do is give a definition of gerrymandering, because I think that a lot of the people who listen in the audience don't really know what that is.
Yeah, I mean, I'll step in because we both know the subject, but basically it is the use of census data to reorganize districts so they favor certain groups, certain ethnicities to be more or more beneficial to one party or the other. So if the Democrats are in power and the Supreme Court's leaning to the left and the new census comes out, there'll be tweaks and changes to the way districts are mapped to benefit the Democrats versus the Republicans. And both parties do it. And if you look at districts on the map, they make no sense. They can stretch entirely around the city to provide a Republican candidate a better or much larger vote amongst white Americans versus an urban center. So the gerrymandering has affected the government itself in terms of who we elect significantly, and that really needs to be straightened out. It's one of the major flaws in our Constitution.
Right. Kendall, if young people want to vote and they don't understand, because in our schools, for example, there's no more civics classes, and I don't know whether young people talk to their parents about this, because it's not the subject that they probably are kind of interested in. But if you had a chance to talk to young people and tell them about the electoral system and all of the other things that go with the election, what would you say to them?
Sure. There's two things that I'll mention in terms of people that are younger, new to the election process. And it goes back, believe it or not, to a story that Bruce Springsteen told before his concerts in the 80s. And what he did is he referenced how that if you have blind faith in your leaders and you're not involved in the democratic process, it can get you killed. It can lead to war. And at the time, he was referring to Vietnam. Mm-hmm. At the time, it was kind of dramatic, and it was like, okay. And then George Bush in 2003 went to war in Iraq. Right. And that happened. And I don't want to say it's blind faith, but if you're young enough to be drafted, you better take a real serious interest in this election to look at what's going to happen. And then secondly is, I think you have to go and see what the candidates are offering policy-wise on their websites, not read it from the media through a filter. Like, what is the raw plan they want to put in place? How's that going to affect them? Does it really affect their lives? And is there a plan? So, like the Libertarian candidate, I don't know if he has a fleshed-out plan, but you should look at all your options and make the most informed judgment you can, and not base it solely on what you see on CNN's primetime, ratings-driven, ad-driven model. Right. That's all about getting people to dial in about the drama of Trump.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, you just mentioned another word, and that is the word libertarian. I'd like you to tell our audience what a libertarian is.
Really? Well, the basic definition of libertarian is the least amount of government is the best government, and people can use their own devices and their own judgment to make their own lives whatever they make it out to be. It's not about government interference. It's limiting as much government interference as humanly possible.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think about that?
Part of me agrees on some level that liberty should be an important thing. I think from two perspectives. One is I think every American should be proud not to have to rely on government to get by in life. They should be productive citizens of society. But on the other side also is for people who are gay and want to marry within their own gender, like there's a liberty to that. Mm-hmm. And if that makes you happy, go ahead. Like, why not just embrace that? And that's being embraced a lot by your younger listeners. That's a main core interest of theirs. Mm-hmm. So, and at the same time, I think libertarians in general do want to turn away from the world and not engage with the world, and that's going to make it a lot more dangerous, and that's the downside.
Yeah. Okay, we're almost at the end of our show, so I always like to ask my guests what they want to tell our audience that they haven't already said. So we'll start with you, Kendall. Is there something that you think our audience needs to know?
I think the audience, it's hard because we're authors. I think that the one thing to leave with listeners is, in terms of Trumpicana and in terms of this election, have some fun with it, enjoy it. Our stories, I think, will entertain you. And I don't think it's black and white in terms of where our positions are, but I go to Trumpicana.com to check out our information, the backstory. You can contact us on social outlets as well. But I think at this point, it's not all dire, and that hopefully we are a resource for some fun and entertainment during this election cycle.
Well, and what about you, Presley? Is there something that you think our audience needs to hear?
It's important to think about the consequences of your actions. That is the point of Trumpicana's two stories. The Bruce Springsteen comment resonates, right? You have to exercise your responsibility as a voting member of American society. And if you don't do it, something could happen that you may not agree with and could actually compromise your lifestyle, your rights, your prospects. It's really important to think about consequences. Right. And yes, www.Trumpicana.com for everything you ever want to know about Trumpicana.
Well, again, I think you are just absolutely two amazing men who have written what I think will be a very popular book. It's called Trumpicana, and my guests today have been KENDALL SMITH and Presley Acuna, who are the authors of the book. And so I would like to say to them, good luck with the, selling the book. And for those in the audience, if you want to talk to KENDALL and also to Presley, do you have a website?
Yeah, so it is www.Trumpicana.com, and you can also write to us. Just write to authors@Trumpicana.com, and we'll get your message. We also have a Facebook page and a Twitter page. You can find Twitter at PercPub, PERCPUB, and then Facebook, just search for Trumpicana and you'll find it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for being on the Susan Brender Show. It's been a delight and a very funny kind of interview because, Trumpicana, what a name. That's a lot of fun. Okay, thank you again, guys.
It's been a pleasure, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.